The following program is a Town of Colonie television production of the William K. Sanford Town Library.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this very special edition of Young at Heart. My name is Tom Scarff. I am the director of the age-friendly Albany County program for County Executive Dan McCoy. And as many of you know, this is kind of a resurrected program from a program I did back in the 70s and 80s on WRGB Channel 6, which was also called Young at Heart. And the good people here at the Town of Colonie Library and the Town of Colonie itself have graciously invited us to do this program here. This is as I said, a very special edition because I have somebody with me today that I have a lot of respect for. Now, in the past, we've done a number of programs with, I call him her assembly partner in crime, if you want to say that, Assemblymember John McDonald from the 108th Assembly District. And my guest today is his partner in crime in the Assembly, Assemblymember Pat Fahy from the 109th Assembly District. Hi, how are you, Pat?
Thank you. Great to be here.
And you like to be called Pat?
Yes, Pat absolutely
Wonderful.
works.
Pat, you have a wonderful career, a background. Actually, you work for a person that I respected so much, and that was Senator Paul Simon from Illinois. What was it like to work with him?
Oh, it was one of the more fascinating times of my life, quite frankly. I spent about 7 years on Capitol Hill, and the first 4 of those were with Senator Simon. Started out on a fellowship program because I'm a former presidential management intern, now called fellow. And as a part of a rotation in that program, I went up to the Senate, and at that time it was for Max Baucus, but I'd kept applying to Senator Simon's office and had the good fortune of working for him when he served on the Labor and Human Resources Committee, which has since been called the Labor and Education Committee, at that time chaired by Ted Kennedy, interestingly enough. And Senator Simon from Illinois, which is my home state, he chaired the Employment Subcommittee, but he always loved education, so it gave me a wonderful intro, and I wrote the early draft of his National Literacy Act, as well as all sorts of amendments for the Job Training Partnership Act. So it was a fascinating time, and very, very, very different than it is now in DC. There was a much more of a sense of bipartisanship, especially when it came to a number of social issues or programs like education or workforce training.
Now, that was his landmark piece of legislation, too, was the Literacy Act, right?
Yes. He wrote a book about it, about the illiterate American and the tongue-tied American. He wrote a couple of books, and it was really the highlight of my career there was working for him.
Now, if I remember correctly, he never graduated from college, did he?
He never graduated from college. That's right. He started out. He had a high school degree and dropped out when he was 19 because he had an interest in journalism, and he had served in I think he was working part-time, as I recall correctly, for a local newspaper. The newspaper became available to buy in those days very, very cheap because it was a very small town newspaper.
Right.
He stepped in to buy it or run it, and the rest is history. Got very, very involved, and right through his career, he kept up a weekly column that ended up distributed to many newspapers, but he kept up a weekly column, so he still had the journalist and the writer's mindset. And by the way, and this was even in the early 90s, well, late 80s, early 90s by this point, he was still typing it out on a typewriter, that column.
Is that right?
And then somebody would put it into the computer for him, one of his staff. So yes, it was a wonderful man, died way too young.
Well, don't tell anybody, but I would prefer a typewriter sometimes because the staff back at the office get upset with me sometimes because they're telling me you dump this and that file, make sure, and we'll talk about that pretty soon too, about seniors and technology and things like that. But it just goes to show you that if you have drive and you have ability, no matter where you come from, you can do it. Because Simon actually taught at the Kennedy School of Government, at the Harvard School of Government, probably the Kennedy School, I would imagine.
Yeah, for a while there, yes. Especially after he retired, he remained incredibly active, right up till the day he died. And as I said, he was still relatively young, young by my standards. I think in his mid-70s,
right.
And in great health. Just had a heart issue.
So you took that labor intensive background that you had with that particular committee, and you worked as an associate commissioner of the New York State Labor Department. What were you doing there?
Well, just in a quick interim, I also then worked in the early Bill Clinton administration, doing congressional affairs for the U.S. Department of Labor.
Oh,
Again,
okay.
because I'd spent a lot of time on workforce issues and the education-related issues connected to that, I was able to do the advocacy work for the Clinton administration when they came in to get their agenda through Congress. Then left to spend a little stint back in Chicago working at the local level there in Chicago,
right.
and then moved here. My husband was already here, and ended up here because of my husband. He was tenured, I wasn't at RPI.
And your husband's a professor at RPI, right?
Yes, Wayne Beckett, different last name. But anyway, so then when after President Obama was elected in, I guess that would be 2008.
Right.
Everything had changed, and it was a wonderful time to reconnect with Washington. By then, with the early Spitzer administration, which, as you know, did not last long.
Right.
But in 2007, I'd gone over to the New York Department of Labor, again doing congressional and other intergovernmental relations, mainly to advocate for funding. That was right at the beginning of the last big recession, Great Recession as some called it. So it was to advocate for unemployment benefits as well as workforce training benefits and what we call one-stop service.
Now you've also done some consulting for different organizations.
Yeah, a little bit.
Was the Boys Club one of them?
No, I served on the board. Served on the board.
Oh, the Albany Boys Club.
Yes, the Albany Boys
wonderful.
and Girls Club. Yes.
You and
yes.
Sheriff Apple
and Sheriff Apple. That's right. In fact, that's how I first met him.
John Carney and a whole bunch of.
John Carney is still one of my favorite people.
Yeah.
He still serves. I had to step off because I wanted to get them some grant monies. And if I'm serving on a board, I can't because of ethics concerns.
Conflict. Right.
I can't serve on the board, but still very devoted to the Boys and Girls Club and other youth organizations.
Then you ran for Albany School Board.
And then, yes, after moving here, my son was 1 year old, and we moved to Albany. My husband had already lived here, as I mentioned, but I immediately began to get involved and and I was deeply influenced by work I'd done in Chicago on the small schools movement.
Right.
So began to get involved in the next thing. I was asked to run for the school board. So I have to say, some days the politics of urban education make work in the New York State Assembly look
absolutely
look very congenial. So it was quite an introduction to street level politics. If
2 years as president of the school board.
1 year,
okay.
A 4-year term.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
And then you ran for assembly? Is that
A number of years later, yeah,
Okay.
ran for the assembly in 2012. But even though I had been off the school board and working full time, I have to say, because of a lot of the controversies, some good, some bad, and the rebuilding of all the Albany schools, it actually helped with my name recognition, especially when I ran even in the three towns I represent of Bethlehem, Guilderland, and New Scotland.
Now, before we get into legislation and things like that, you have 2 children.
Yes.
One of them is in high school now.
Just graduated
She
in
did graduate,
June.
okay.
Yes.
And
yes.
where is she going?
She is at the University of Rochester, so I just became an empty nester.
Okay, and you're And you're, except on holidays.
Except on holidays and text all
summertime.
morning, noon, and night.
And your son is?
My son is at Ithaca College and started at RPI, actually, where his dad is, and switched from engineering to filmmaking.
And I have seen some of Brendan
Beckett.
I've
yes.
seen some of Brendan Beckett's films. If anybody wants to see him, go onto YouTube because the young man has a great future. You should watch out for him because he really has done some great work.
Very, very kind. He will be very appreciative. I'm very proud of the work he did even in high school.
Yeah.
Just had a real passion. And there's a wonderful Vietnam series that's airing right now on WMHT. And it's actually made me reflect upon him, the author that has deeply influenced him, and he's done a number of small, short films about Vietnam.
Right. Yep.
And that author, Tim O'Brien, has been repeatedly interviewed on the Ken Burns series that's airing right now.
Yeah, that's an amazing series.
It's one of the single best documentary series I have ever seen. It's just truly, truly remarkable.
I agree. Absolutely. Now, your daughter both kids are graduate of public schools?
Albany High, yes.
Okay, that's wonderful. That opens it up to a whole, it really brings people, let's young people see what life is all about when you go to a public school.
Well, and in Albany, it's had its challenges. And continues to have challenges. There's about 70% of the children going there are in poverty, so tremendous needs. But the diversity, I think, is what kept us going. It has one of the most remarkable. The kids learn geography by just attending school. We're now up to, I think it's 57 languages taught in just the Albany schools.
Can you imagine that?
It's honestly, it's extraordinary, and I end up mentoring a remarkable refugee child who continues to be my son's best friend. So some things you can't learn from a book.
And I have 3 interns that will be working with me starting Tuesday from the school, from Albany High School. And I'm looking forward to having them with me because they're going to be working on age-friendly Albany County. We have a lot of work to do, and we talked yesterday, and it's going to be very exciting.
Good for you, because if I had my magic wand, no one would graduate high school without some type of shadowing or some type of internship, and certainly no one should graduate college without some type of internship or fellowship, because it really opens your eyes. So good for you.
Dale Ghetto, the principal of Albany High School, is a very good friend of mine. So
Love Dale.
I called Dale a few weeks ago and said I need help, and she said we have this great internship program and we need places to place people. So we're going to have them. We had some interns here during the summer, college interns. They're off to college again. I hear from them all the time. They're all doing well. So I'm looking forward to it also.
It's great.
Pat, what would you say your number one priority is in the legislature right now?
Well, when I ran, I tried to keep it simple because there's so many different issues. But I look, till this day, no matter what the issue is, I look at it through the lens of education or jobs, because I think no matter what we're talking about, whether it's housing, whether it's the needs of seniors, whether it's the environment, whether it's health care, it affects your education level generally tends to dictate your health. Your access to health care, good health care, but often how you take care of yourself. The higher educated statistically, generally the better educated, the better we are to know about the importance of exercising and eating right. So everything I do, I tend to look at through jobs and education. Now I tend to add the environment there because I think the climate change issue, especially as you see these recent disasters, those are just vitally, vitally important. But while we work on a lot of issues, I just came from a child care task force meeting. Again, while that is not directly a job issue, it impacts jobs, because if parents can't afford quality daycare that's at an affordable rate, it impacts their ability to participate in the workforce. So again, it impacts the ability to either keep or access jobs. So so it's a lens I look at through no matter what the issue is, and that's how I kind of gauge or how I prioritize my issues.
Now, are funds, educational funds, do they come from the feds down to the state, down to the local, or is it appropriations from the legislature and the governor's budget?
That's an excellent question, because a lot of times people misunderstand this. There's only a small percent of education funds that come from the federal government, often 8%, anywhere from 6 to 10%, depending on your state. The vast majority of education funding used to come about roughly half from locals, often property taxes, which is an unfair way to do it. And I don't know about you, but everybody's sick of the high property taxes. Right. The other half of those remaining funds are usually from the state. In New York, we're a little bit out of whack, and most states are getting a little out of whack, relying too much on property taxes and not enough on state funds. So we've been changing that a lot in the last few years. I'm actually very proud of, in my 5 years in the legislature, we've been able to increase funding over 31%, which is dramatic, because during my years on the school board, it was all about budget cuts. So we've dramatically turned around local education with increasing state funds so that we can minimize the reliance on local property taxes, which people were being taxed out of their homes, especially seniors. And that was something that, while I know a lot of people still don't like the 2% property tax cap, and it's made it very hard on local and county governments, in terms of seniors and other property homeowners, we had to draw the line. But now we need to step in and assist with state funds.
Can I put in a plug for my boss?
Of course.
County Executive McCoy, who's brought us 2 years of zero property tax. And the first year was at the 2%. I don't know what's going to happen this year, but, and part of that is because he does believe very strongly, as you just said, that it has a negative effect on seniors if we don't. And the funny thing about senior citizens, you hear a lot of people who send their kids to a private school or who don't have children say, why should I have to pay school tax because I don't have any kids in public school? Seniors usually don't talk like that. They understand what what quality education is. Many of us are products of the public school system in wherever we lived before, because there weren't all of the private schools that they have today. So anything that can be done to keep that down a little bit, I think is good. Now, there are no, and this is probably a local question, discounts for seniors for school taxes, right? Is that the STAR?
My understanding is the STAR, and the seniors get the enhanced one. So it does help, but they are still too high. Right. I ring a lot of doorbells to get into my office, as County Exec McCoy has rung, and you never hear anybody complain about their income taxes, and rarely about the utility. But the property tax issue is a very, very serious one, and so I am glad that we have held the line, but now, because of the needs at the local level, we need to make sure that we are addressing those at the state level.
So getting into some senior issues, there is a critical need for enhanced services for our senior population. And everybody says, well, seniors are living longer, and yes, people are living longer, but that doesn't mean that there aren't critical needs in areas. One of those areas are the hill towns. You said New Scotland is one of your towns. The hill towns have transportation problems. They have communications problems, and it's the same thing all over. Very proud people who don't want to take a handout, although they've paid for it all their lives. I'm wondering if anything can be done on a state level to see if we can bring more money into the state and then filter it down to Albany County or any county in the Capital District area that can actually give us the ability to increase services rather than decrease services.
Yeah, and well, it's like anything else with the budget, the operating dollars, we spend a lot on capital dollars with investments. As you know, the governor has announced a lot of rebuilding of major airports in upstate, as well as train stations, even here in Schenectady. So we've done, we just had the new convention center open in downtown Albany. So we've done a lot of capital investments, but where the budget gets very difficult are the year-to-year operating dollars. My understanding this year is we're looking at already a revenue shortfall of $4 billion, and then you heard the governor again very worried about this cut with the health care, even the existing health care program, the Obamacare or the affordable health care. So it's a constant push-pull on what we can and need to do for our seniors. But I agree, it is money well spent because we want to do what we can to keep seniors not only in their homes, but thriving in their homes. And the one way to do that is to make sure they do have the transportation so that they can access the doctor's appointments and access any libraries as we're in now. Those are really important services. We were able to increase funding for NORCs,
right,
as well as senior housing this year. As you know, we had been stalled for a couple of years on supportive housing. This year, the logjam broke for a lot of reasons, but particularly some battles with New York City and development money. But that logjam broke, and I think it's $25 or $30 million that was increased for supportive senior housing.
Now, is that affordable senior housing?
It's the affordable,
okay.
or supportive.
Supportive, okay.
And exactly how the income criteria on that is, I'd have to go back to. But at least it was a very essential increase, because not only do we want to keep seniors in their homes, if not, we want to make sure they are in the apartments where they are living as independently as possible and well.
Because I know, Albany, the city of Albany has a wealth of senior housing, affordable senior housing, and that's because back in the 70s, Mayor Corning saw there were federal funds for this new program to provide housing, affordable housing for senior citizens. That was when Maggie Kuhn started the Gray Panthers, and there was that's when they got mandatory retirement was ended, and a lot of different things that she took to the streets with her Gray Panthers, and so they opened up the floodgates, as you said, and there was a lot of money. And the mayor we had Townsend Park apartments and Parkview apartments and Westview apartments, and I mean they were just all over the place. But now it did stall for a long time.
Yes.
And now we have, as I think I told you, 23% of the population of Albany County over the age of 60. And obviously in the next census that will go up.
Yes.
And now people are looking at 55 and older, so it'd probably be close to 35%. And a lot of people do need affordable housing. So hopefully that will
yes, I think this was long awaited. Again, lots of controversies, but it was a couple of $1 billion that was spent on supportive and affordable housing, and with quite a few million directed right at seniors. So while, as you know, the chunk of that often goes downstate, we will have some here, right, and making sure that we're doing what we can, because it is a resource, and those are folks, my parents. I'm blessed that both of them are still with us, and while they're in Chicago, one of the things that's been just so important to them is being able to stay in their home. So
absolutely.
So the services that come to them have really made the difference with allowing them to stay in our house. So I more than recognize the need.
Now, did your parents immigrate to the United States?
Yes, I'm first generation American, first generation college. So yes.
You understand some of the problems that immigrants and refugees are having in today's world.
And I think it's why I appreciated Albany High, and it's partly why a young refugee child, now young man, became so important to me, because I saw what my parents went through, and I know of the difficulties that they went through. And in so many ways, whether immigrants, refugees, or others, it's a universal desire for one that their children would have a chance at a better education, and that's a universal goal, right? As well as the chance at a better job. And it was the exact same it was with my parents, and I see this now even with this generation, just how important those
now,
are.
I interviewed two of your other partners, Mayor Sheehan and Supervisor Mahan, together a couple of weeks ago, and how lucky we are in Albany County to have such a welcoming community.
Yes.
Both the city of Albany, the county, the town of Colonie, Albany County as a whole, just embracing the diversity that teaches our children, who are Americans by birth, that we're a global society today, and it's a wonderful thing. And I also wanted to tell you, there's a program called Foster Grandparents in RSVP, Retired Senior Volunteer Program. Funding has been cut for that. What better education is there for an intergenerational program where children can learn from their elders? I had an intern from China this past summer who was telling me about how revered the elders are in his country.
Yes.
And a lot of times, thank God not today, I don't think as much as it was in the past, we threw our grandparents away.
Yeah, I will say that is something that has deeply impressed me with where my parents came from. In their case, the woman would marry into the farm, but she would then help. And because the parents never left, so the farm would stay in the family, and it was a multi-generational family in the same home, often very crowded, mind you.
Right,
Both
right.
my parents came from very large families. But it was, and my father, decades ago, would make the comments about in this country, it's criminal the way we treat our elderly. So I think I was always very deeply influenced by that you take care of your family and you respect those multiple generations, and the children can learn so much. I've spent a lot of time working to save the Children's Museum here, the CMOS, Children's Museum of Science and Technology, that was supposed to go to SUNY Poly. And anyway, we're working on a much bigger, better museum that we hope to bring to downtown Albany. And I keep envisioning a room there where we'll make sure we have rocking chairs and a quiet zone, if you will, so that we can have those multi-generations there with children, learning, playing with building blocks, and just being held, because we need to value the role of our seniors.
And it doesn't just benefit the young people, but it certainly benefits the seniors too, because there's so much that we can learn, that I learned over the summer with my interns, and I'm sure I'm going to do the same with the interns that are coming from Albany High School, that I learned from these folks. I mean, there's so many things that I don't understand until they explain it to me.
Yes.
And I sit back and do what I criticized my parents for doing when the Beatles came, and I could not understand how they got all upset about it, but because they didn't know what it was all about until I explained it to them. And it's the same thing with technology, especially today.
Yes, and it's not just the technological barriers you break down when you have young people around, but you're breaking down the barriers of stereotypes that children are this, or they're dismissive, or they're not respectful. So when you can bring them together, everybody learns. Because I often say, my mother only finished elementary school, but she could have a PhD in wisdom, and it took me many years to learn that, of course, right? But I think if we exposed our youth more to elderly, we would see that most elderly have earned a PhD in wisdom just from their years.
Absolutely.
Yes.
One thing I'd like to ask you about very quickly, and Assemblymember McDonald, being a pharmacist, has spoken about the opioid crisis and how it affects seniors as well as everybody else. Is anything going to be done about this? I know that the state has made some real serious progress, but what can we do about it?
Well, I think some of it is awareness raising, because what's different from the crisis of the 70s and 80s, or 60s and 70s, and the crisis now, is that this one really was kicked off with legal prescriptions. In other words, it started out with maybe an over subscribing of pain medications. So this is just very, very different. The last 2 years we've done multi-pronged bills to try to get at the supply and the demand side, and now even saying where a doctor cannot write out pain medication for more than, I think it's 5 days now. We had toyed with 3 to 7 days, and I think we ended up with 5 days, to try to make sure that you're not walking. I broke my arm a few years ago. I walked out with a 30-day prescription that I never used, thankfully, because I was able to withstand the pain. So we need to address the supply side as well as the demand, and really no longer stigmatize those who do have addictions. And the youth as well as the elderly who have ended up with pain medication addictions, and make sure that's coming into the forefront, and that we're doing the awareness to get people the help they need. And we're doing better on that, but is it still a fight at times with insurance companies or even with the individuals to get them to address those needs? Sure, we have a ways to go. It's been alarming what's happened here, completely alarming, but I think even just the awareness raising, getting the medical community to cooperate with not oversubscribing or finding alternative non-addictive pain medications that alone has been huge, and I've seen great articles written about that. So we're getting there, but a long ways to go. And you're right. There's it does not know age bounds on this.
Absolutely right. Well, listen, Pat, I want to thank you very much. Assemblymember Pat Fahy has been our guest today. If you live in the 109th Assembly District, you're very lucky, because I hope you got a little up close and personal idea of exactly what the Assemblymember does for you, where she's come from, and hopefully will be with us for a long time in the New York State Assembly. She represents us extremely well, and I want to thank you for being with us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
If this shows before October 3rd, Albany Law School, Age-Friendly Albany County is presenting Legends of the Judiciary with Victoria Graffio, retired judge from the Court of Appeals, Howard Levine, retired judge from the Court of Appeals, Lawrence Kahn, he's a senior federal court judge, and one of my favorites, the Honorable Leonard Weiss, who is a retired presiding justice of the Court of Appeals, 3rd Judicial District. If not, I'll see you next month on Young at Heart.